The diplomatic chamber aboard the Nexus station had never hosted such a diverse gathering. Representatives from 47 different species sat in carefully arranged circles, each group maintaining the precise distance required by their respective biological needs. The air recyclers worked overtime, filtering and adjusting atmospheric conditions to accommodate everyone from the methane-breathing Kythera to the high-radiation Zephyrians. Ambassador Vexhai of the Triangulum Collective tapped his 6 clawed fingers against the crystalline table surface. As the elected speaker for this unprecedented assembly, he carried the weight of galactic law on his shoulders. Today's discussion would determine humanity's fate in the cosmic community. The evidence before us is undeniable, Vexhai announced, his translated voice carrying through the chamber's universal communication system. The human species has violated 17 separate interstellar treaties, engaged in unauthorized terraforming activities, and repeatedly ignored quarantine protocols established by the Galactic Health Authority. Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. The insectoid wrecks clicked their mandibles in agreement, while the gaseous ethereals shifted their containment fields nervously. Everyone present knew the severity of the accusations. Furthermore, continued Vexhai, their military expansion into restricted sectors has destabilized 3 entire star systems. The Vorthan Empire lost 12 colonies to human exploratory missions that turned into permanent settlements. The evidence suggests a pattern of aggressive expansion that threatens the stability of our entire galactic community. Dr. Sarachin sat alone at the defendants' table, representing all of humanity before this cosmic tribunal. Her small frame seemed insignificant among the towering alien forms surrounding her, but her eyes held a steely determination that had served her species well throughout their rapid expansion into space. Honored delegates, Sarah began, standing to address the assembly. I won't deny that humanity has made mistakes. We're a young species, barely 3 centuries into interstellar travel. But the accusations of aggression miss a crucial point about human nature. The chamber fell silent. Several delegates leaned forward, curious despite their obvious bias against the human race. We don't expand out of malice or greed, Sarah continued. We expand because we can't help ourselves. When we see a world that could support life, we feel compelled to make it bloom. When we encounter suffering, we're driven to help. When we face the impossible, we refuse to accept defeat. A harsh laugh erupted from the Korthak delegation. Their leader, General Zarthal, stood with his massive form casting shadows across nearby tables. Typical human arrogance. You justify your aggression with pretty words about helping others. Sarah faced the general without flinching. Would you prefer we had left the Yarnith colonies to die when the solar flares destroyed their atmospheric processors? Should we have ignored the distress signals from the Pleku research station when their life support systems failed? Every unauthorized action you've listed was a response to someone's cry for help. The Yarnith delegate, a tall, willowy being with translucent skin, spoke up quietly. The humans saved 14,000 of our people. The solar radiation would have killed them all. General Zarthal dismissed this with a wave of his armored hand. Isolated incidents don't excuse systematic treaty violations. The humans are a plague that spreads across the galaxy, consuming resources and disrupting established order. Established order? Sarah's voice carried a note of challenge. You mean the order where the strong prey on the weak? Where entire species are abandoned to die because helping them might be inconvenient or expensive? The tension in the chamber grew thick enough to cut. Several delegates began urgent whispered conversations with their advisors. Ambassador Vexhai called for order with a sharp crack of his gavel. The defendant will restrict her remarks to the specific charges, he commanded. This is not a philosophical debate about galactic politics. But Sarah wasn't finished. With respect, Ambassador, it is exactly that. You're not just judging humanity's actions. You're deciding what kind of galaxy we all want to live in. Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the chamber in pulsing red as the station's AI announced a priority alert. Attention all personnel. Code Red emergency in Sector 7. Containment breach detected. All non-essential personnel must evacuate immediately. The delegates began to panic, rising from their seats and moving toward the exits. But Ambassador Vexhai's voice cut through the chaos. Remain calm. Security protocols are in effect. The breach is contained to Sector 7. We are in no immediate danger. General Zarthal checked his personal communication device and his expression darkened. The Dragon of Terminus has broken free from its containment cell. A collective gasp swept through the chamber. Even species that had never encountered the creature knew its reputation. The Dragon of Terminus wasn't actually a dragon in any traditional sense, but an ancient entity discovered in the ruins of a dead civilization. Its crystalline form pulsed with energy that could disintegrate matter at the molecular level. It had killed hundreds of researchers and military personnel before finally being contained using technology that barely functioned. "How many casualties?" asked the ethereal representative, their gaseous form shimmering with distress. "Unknown," replied Zarthal grimly. "But the creature is moving toward the civilian sections of the station. Evacuation protocols are in effect, but..." He didn't need to finish. Everyone knew that evacuation would take hours, and the dragon could traverse the station in minutes. Thousands of beings, including delegates' families and support staff, were about to die. Dr. Chen stood up abruptly. "I need to get to Sector 7. "Absolutely not," Vexhai commanded. "You're confined to this chamber pending tribunal proceedings." "Ambassador, my daughter is in the civilian quarters. She's visiting the station's educational center with other diplomatic children." The revelation sent a chill through the assembly. Several delegates had brought their offspring to witness what they believed would be a historic condemnation of humanity. Now those children were directly in the creature's path. General Zarthal activated his combat armor's communication system. "Military units are already responding. Human assistance is neither requested nor required." "Your military units will be slaughtered," Sarah said bluntly. "That creature has energy capabilities beyond anything we fully understand. Conventional weapons are useless against it." "Then, what do you propose?" demanded Vexhai. "That we simply watch as it kills everyone in its path?" Sarah was already moving toward the chamber's exit. "I propose you let me try something unconventional." Two Korthak guards moved to block her path, but a sharp gesture from their general made them step aside. Zarthal's expression was unreadable behind his battle mask. "If you have a plan, human, speak it." Sarah paused at the doorway. "I don't have a plan. But I have something else. I have a daughter who doesn't know she's supposed to be afraid of impossible things." Before anyone could stop her, she was running through the corridors of Nexus Station, heading directly toward the most dangerous creature in the known galaxy. Behind her, the assembled delegates sat in stunned silence. Ambassador Vexhai slowly returned to his seat, his 6 eyes fixed on the chamber's main display screen. It showed the Dragon of Terminus moving inexorably through the station's corridors, its crystalline form leaving traces of molecular destruction in its wake. "Should we follow her?" asked the Yarnith delegate quietly. General Zarthal checked his weapon systems one final time. "We follow. Not to help the human, but to witness the inevitable failure of their reckless species." But, as the delegates filed out of the chamber, more than one wondered if they were about to witness something else entirely. Something that would change everything they thought they knew about the strange, impossible humans who had burst into their ordered galaxy like a force of nature. The Dragon of Terminus continued its destructive path through Nexus Station, unaware that it was about to encounter the most unpredictable force in the universe, a human parent protecting their child. Dr. Sarah Chen sprinted through the winding corridors of Nexus Station, her diplomatic robes billowing behind her as she navigated the maze of interconnected sections. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the walls, and the constant blare of alarms made it difficult to think clearly. But Sarah's mind was focused on one thing: reaching her 8-year-old daughter Emma before the Dragon of Terminus did. The station's layout was designed for efficiency rather than speed, with multiple security checkpoints and atmospheric transition zones between sectors. Under normal circumstances, the journey from the diplomatic quarter to the civilian education center would take 20 minutes. Sarah didn't have 20 minutes. She burst through the first security checkpoint, her diplomatic credentials automatically opening the sealed blast doors. The Kithara guard on duty tried to stop her, but Sarah was already past him, shouting over her shoulder that she was authorized for emergency movement. The corridors in Sector 4 showed signs of hasty evacuation. Personal belongings lay scattered on the floor where people had dropped them in their rush to escape. Emergency evacuation pods lined the walls, their status lights blinking green to indicate readiness. But Sarah knew that even the fastest evacuation procedures wouldn't be quick enough. Behind her, she could hear the heavy footsteps of the tribunal delegates and their security details. General Zarthal's voice carried over the alarms as he coordinated with station security forces.
All military units converge on Sector 7.
Establish defensive perimeters at junction points Alpha through Delta.
Civilian evacuation takes priority, but do not engage the entity unless absolutely necessary.
Sarah reached the intersection leading to Sector 5 and paused to check the station's emergency display panel. The Dragon of Terminus was moving faster than anticipated, its path of destruction cutting through the station's superstructure like a knife through tissue paper. It had already consumed 3 research laboratories and was approaching the main reactor housing.
More concerning was its apparent intelligence. The creature wasn't moving randomly through the station.
It seemed to be following the path of highest life sign concentration, as if drawn to areas where the most beings were present. The civilian quarters were exactly such an area. Sarah resumed running, her lungs burning from the exertion and the slightly different atmospheric composition in this section of the station.
The Nexus station was a marvel of engineering, designed to accommodate dozens of different species simultaneously.
But this also meant that each sector had its own environmental controls, and the transition zones took precious seconds to navigate. She burst into Sector 6 just as a group of Rex military specialists came around the corner.
The insectoid soldiers were carrying weapons she didn't recognize, their carapaces gleaming with defensive energy fields.
Dr. Chen called their leader, Commander Thixal.
You must return to the safe zone immediately. This area is being evacuated. My daughter is in the education center, Sarah gasped, not slowing down. I'm not leaving without her.
The military will handle all evacuations.
Your presence here only complicates our operations.
Sarah skidded to a halt and spun to face the commander.
Your weapons won't work against that thing.
You know it, I know it, and everyone on this station knows it. The Dragon of Terminus isn't just dangerous because it's powerful.
It's dangerous because it's completely alien. We don't understand its motivations, its weaknesses, or even its basic nature. Commander Thixal's compound eyes focused on her with obvious irritation. Then, what makes you think you can succeed where our military forces cannot?
Because I'm not trying to fight it, Sarah replied.
I'm trying to understand it.
Before the commander could respond, a new voice cut through the conversation. Ambassador Vexhai and the other tribunal delegates had caught up, their various life support systems and mobility aids making them a bizarre procession through the station's corridors.
Dr. Chen speaks truth, said the ethereal representative, their gaseous form shimmering with urgency. My people have encountered similar entities before.
Force is useless against beings that exist partially outside our dimensional framework. General Zarthal pushed forward, his massive armored form dwarfing the others.
If conventional weapons are useless, then, what do you suggest? That we simply allow it to consume the entire station?
I suggest we try something that's never been attempted, Sarah said, resuming her movement toward the civilian quarters.
Direct communication.
The group fell into step behind her, their debate continuing as they navigated the increasingly damaged corridors. The Dragon's Passage had left distinctive marks on the station's structure. Walls showed molecular decay patterns, and the very air seemed to shimmer with residual energy.
Communication requires a common framework, observed the Yarnith delegate. We have no basis for understanding such a creature. Don't we? Sarah asked, pausing at another security checkpoint. It responds to life signs. It moves with apparent purpose.
It was contained for years without attempting to escape.
That suggests intelligence, not just destructive instinct.
They reached the transition zone leading to Sector 7, but the blast doors were sealed. Emergency protocols had locked down the entire section to prevent the Dragon's escape. Sarah placed her palm on the security scanner, but her diplomatic credentials weren't sufficient for emergency override. General Zarthal stepped forward and activated his military access codes. The doors began to slide open, revealing a corridor filled with destruction beyond anything they had imagined. The Dragon of Terminus had passed through here less than 10 minutes earlier, but its passage had fundamentally altered the space. The walls showed signs of molecular reorganization, as if the creature's very presence had rewritten the laws of physics in its immediate vicinity. The floor was partially transparent in places, revealing the complex mechanical systems beneath the station's superstructure.
By the eternal void, whispered Commander Thixal. It's not just destroying matter. It's transforming it. Sarah stared at the transformed corridor with growing understanding. It's not trying to destroy the station. It's trying to communicate. The assembled delegates looked at her with expressions ranging from confusion to outright disbelief.
But Sarah was studying the patterns left in the dragon's wake, her scientific training finally providing insight into the creature's behavior. "Look at the molecular structures," she explained, pointing to the transformed walls.
"They're not random.
There's a pattern here, a consistency to the changes.
It's like it's trying to show us something. Or preparing to digest us more efficiently," muttered General Zarthal.
Sarah ignored his pessimism and activated her personal scanner, analyzing the residual energy signatures left by the creature's passage. The readings were unlike anything in the established databases, but certain elements seemed familiar. The energy patterns match theoretical descriptions of transdimensional communication arrays, she said, her excitement growing despite the danger.
What if the dragon isn't trying to destroy anything? What if it's trying to establish contact? Before anyone could respond, a new alarm cut through the ambient noise. The station's AI announced an update that sent chills through the assembled group. "Alert, entity has reached Sector 7 Alpha. Civilian evacuation incomplete. Estimated 43 beings remain in the affected area, including 16 juveniles." Sarah's blood turned to ice. Sector 7 Alpha contained the educational center where Emma and the other diplomatic children were visiting.
The evacuation procedures were designed for adult beings who could move quickly and follow complex instructions. Children, especially young ones, would be the last to be evacuated. "We're out of time," she said, breaking into a run toward the heart of Sector 7. The delegates followed, their earlier debate forgotten in the face of immediate crisis. As they moved deeper into the transformed areas of the station, the damage became more severe. But Sarah's earlier observation proved accurate. The destruction followed patterns that suggested intelligence rather than random violence. They rounded a corner and came face to face with the aftermath of the dragon's passage. A massive hole had been burned through the station's hull, but the breach had been sealed by some kind of crystalline growth that prevented atmospheric loss. The emergency force fields flickered around the transformed area, their energy signatures fluctuating wildly. And, beyond the transformed corridor, they could hear something that made Sarah's heart race, the sound of children crying. The Dragon of Terminus had found the education center, and 43 beings, including 16 children, were trapped with the galaxy's most dangerous creature. Among them was Emma Chen, an 8-year-old human girl who was about to become the key to the most important first contact in galactic history. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped forward into the transformed space, moving toward her daughter and toward a confrontation that would challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about communication, understanding, and the true nature of the mysterious entity known as the Dragon of Terminus. The education center had been transformed into something from a fever dream. What had once been a cheerful space designed for young minds to explore the wonders of galactic civilization was now a crystalline cathedral of impossible geometry. The walls pulsed with inner light that shifted through colors that had no names in any known language. At the center of this transformed space stood the Dragon of Terminus. Sarah had seen images of the creature before, captured during its initial discovery and the disastrous attempts to study it. But seeing it in person was an entirely different experience. The being defied easy description, its form seeming to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. It appeared to be made of living crystal that flowed like liquid while maintaining structural integrity that could cut through any known material. The creature stood approximately 3 meters tall, though its exact dimensions seemed to shift depending on the angle of observation. Tendrils of energy flowed from its central mass, extending into the walls and floor of the transformed space. These tendrils pulsed with the same rhythm as a heartbeat, creating a hypnotic pattern of light and shadow. But what captured Sarah's attention wasn't the dragon itself. It was the scene surrounding it. 43 beings sat in a perfect circle around the creature, their various life support systems and environmental suits functioning normally despite the radical changes to their surroundings. The adults among them, teachers and support staff from a dozen different species, sat with expressions of wonder rather than terror. The children displayed the same mixture of curiosity and awe that young minds always showed when encountering something genuinely new. And, at the very front of this circle, closest to the Dragon of Terminus, sat Emma Chen. Sarah's 8-year-old daughter was wearing the same blue jumpsuit she had put on that morning, her dark hair tied back in the practical ponytail Sarah had braided before leaving for the tribunal. Emma sat cross-legged on the transformed floor, her small hands resting on her knees, staring up at the creature with the fearless attention that only children possessed.
Emma, Sarah called softly, not wanting to startle either her daughter or the dragon.
The little girl turned at the sound of her mother's voice, a brilliant smile lighting up her face.
Mommy! You have to see this. The sparkly dragon is trying to talk to us. Sarah stepped carefully into the transformed space, followed by Ambassador Vexhai and the other delegates.
Their various scanning devices were going haywire in the presence of the dragon's energy field, but none of the equipment was malfunctioning in dangerous ways. Instead, the devices seemed to be receiving and attempting to process vast amounts of information. General Zarthal raised his weapon instinctively, but Commander Thixal placed a restraining claw on his arm.
Look at the beings around it, the Vrex officer said quietly. They're unharmed.
More than unharmed, they appear to be enhanced somehow.
It was true. The adults and children in the circle around the dragon showed no signs of fear or distress. Instead, they seemed to be glowing with an inner light that made their various features more distinct, more vivid.
Their eyes held a clarity and depth that suggested expanded awareness.
Sarah approached slowly, her scientific training warring with her parental instincts. Emma, sweetheart, can you tell me what's happening here? Emma turned back to look at the dragon, then back at her mother.
The sparkly dragon was scared, Mommy. It was lost and couldn't find its way home. So it was making patterns to ask for help, but nobody understood what it was saying. Dr. Maylara, the Yarnith teacher who supervised the education center, spoke up from her position in the circle.
The child speaks truth, Dr. Chen.
When the entity first appeared, we prepared for evacuation. But then, young Emma approached it directly, and everything changed. Sarah felt her heart stop.
You approached it? Emma, that was incredibly dangerous.
But it wasn't dangerous, Mommy, Emma replied with the confidence only children possessed.
It was just sad.
Like when you cry because you miss Daddy when he's away on long trips.
The dragon of Terminus shifted slightly, its crystalline form reorienting toward Sarah and the delegates.
Energy patterns flowed across its surface in waves, and the walls around them responded with complementary patterns of light and color.
It's beautiful, whispered the ethereal representative. I've never seen transdimensional communication this complex. Ambassador Vexhai activated his personal recording device. Can you understand what it's trying to communicate?
Dr. Maylara stood gracefully, her willowy form almost seeming to dance in the shifting light.
The entity appears to be lost in our dimensional space.
It's from somewhere else entirely, somewhere where the basic rules of physics operate differently.
Its attempts to return home have been interpreted as aggressive actions. The terraforming incidents, Sarah realized.
The molecular changes to the research stations.
It wasn't trying to destroy anything. It was trying to create dimensional gateways.
General Zarthal lowered his weapon but remained tense.
That's an impressive theory, but how does an 8-year-old human child succeed where our best scientists and diplomats have failed? Emma answered the question herself, standing up from her position and walking directly toward the dragon.
Sarah's instincts screamed at her to grab her daughter and run, but something held her back. The patterns of light flowing between Emma and the creature were unlike anything she had ever seen.
It's not hard, Emma said simply, reaching out to touch one of the dragon's lower tendrils. You just have to not be afraid. Adults are afraid of everything because they think too much about what might go wrong. But sometimes you have to do scary things to help someone. The moment Emma's small hand made contact with the dragon's crystalline surface, the entire space exploded into brilliant light. But, instead of the destructive energy that had characterized the creature's previous interactions, this light was warm and welcoming. It washed over everyone in the room, carrying with it images and emotions that bypassed language entirely. Sarah saw flashes of the dragon's true nature. It was indeed from another dimension, a place where crystalline beings lived in harmony with energy patterns that formed the basis of their civilization. The dragon had been exploring the boundaries between dimensions when it became trapped in their reality, unable to find its way home. Its attempts to communicate had been misinterpreted as attacks. Its efforts to modify matter were actually attempts to create the specific energy signatures needed for dimensional travel. It had been stranded for years, growing increasingly desperate as its isolation continued. But Emma's approach had been different. Instead of trying to understand the dragon intellectually, she had simply offered friendship and compassion. This emotional connection had created the bridge that allowed true communication.
The images flowing through the light showed the dragon's growing relief and gratitude. It had found not just a way to communicate, but beings who were willing to help it return home. The molecular transformations it had caused could be reversed once it was no longer trapped in their dimension. As the light faded, Emma stepped back from the dragon, a huge smile on her face.
See? It just wanted someone to listen.
The dragon of Terminus began to change, its form becoming more fluid and less solid. The crystalline structure that had seemed so threatening now appeared delicate and beautiful, like a sculpture made of living light.
It's preparing to leave, Dr. Melara observed. The dimensional gateway is forming. Ambassador Vexhai checked his recording devices, which were now functioning normally. This changes everything.
If the dragon's actions were misunderstood attempts at communication, then we need to reassess all of humanity's alleged violations. General Zarthal holstered his weapon completely.
The terraforming incidents, the quarantine violations, the unauthorized settlements. If humans were responding to distress calls that we couldn't even detect. Sarah knelt down next to Emma, pulling her daughter into a tight embrace. How did you know it was safe to approach?
Emma shrugged with 8-year-old wisdom.
It looked lonely, Mommy.
And you always taught me that when someone is lonely and scared, the right thing to do is try to help them. The dragon of Terminus pulsed once more, and then began to fade from their dimension entirely. As it departed, the transformed areas of the education center slowly returned to normal, though traces of crystalline beauty remained in the walls and floor. In the silence that followed the dragon's departure, the assembled delegates stood in stunned contemplation of what they had witnessed. A child's simple act of kindness had not only prevented a catastrophe but had also revealed the fundamental misunderstandings that had shaped galactic policy toward humanity. The tribunal that had gathered to condemn the human species now faced an entirely different question. What did it mean when the galaxy's most dangerous creature responded to a human child's compassion with gratitude and friendship? The answer to that question would reshape everything they thought they knew about humans, about communication, and about the true nature of intelligence in the universe. The diplomatic chamber aboard Nexus Station had been hastily reconfigured. Where once formal accusation documents and evidence displays had dominated the space, now holographic recordings of Emma Chen's interaction with the Dragon of Terminus played on continuous loop. The assembled delegates watched in silence as the 8-year-old human girl approached the galaxy's most feared creature with nothing but curiosity and compassion. Ambassador Vexhai had called an emergency session to address the dramatic revelation that had unfolded in the education center. The charges against humanity remained officially active, but every delegate present understood that the entire foundation of their case had crumbled in the space of a few minutes. Honored colleagues, Vexhai began, his 6 eyes reflecting the holographic display. We are faced with evidence that fundamentally challenges our understanding of recent galactic events. The entity known as the Dragon of Terminus has provided us with new perspective on human activities that we previously interpreted as aggressive expansion. General Zarthal sat heavily in his designated space, his massive armored form somehow diminished by the weight of what they had all witnessed. The implications extend beyond simple misunderstanding, he admitted grudgingly. If humans possess the ability to communicate with beings that exist partially outside our dimensional framework, their potential value to galactic civilization is immeasurable. Dr. Melara, who had remained at the station to provide expert testimony about the dragon's communication methods, stood to address the assembly. The child's approach was instinctive rather than trained. This suggests that the trait may be common among humans rather than unique to this individual. Sarah Chen sat at the defendant's table once again, but the atmosphere in the chamber had changed completely. Emma sat beside her, coloring in a digital art pad while the adults discussed the implications of her actions. The little girl seemed completely unaware of the historic nature of the proceedings, occasionally looking up to wave at delegates who had witnessed her interaction with the dragon. Dr. Chen, called the ethereal representative, can you explain how your species developed this apparent ability to bridge communication gaps with non-dimensional entities? Sarah considered the question carefully. I don't think we developed it consciously. Humans have always been drawn to the unknown, to things that others consider dangerous or impossible. Our children especially seem to approach new experiences without the preconceptions that limit adult thinking. But surely this incident was exceptional, protested the Vrex delegate. One child's interaction cannot represent an entire species' capabilities. Before Sarah could answer, Commander Thixal entered the chamber carrying a datapad filled with new information.
Actually, delegate, our investigation suggests otherwise. We've been reviewing human intervention records across the past 50 years, and a pattern has emerged. He activated the chamber's main display, showing a galactic map marked with hundreds of incident locations. Every human action that we interpreted as treaty violation or aggressive expansion was actually a response to some form of distress signal. The Yarnith solar flare crisis, the Pleku research station disaster, the Vorthan colony failures, in every case, humans detected and responded to emergency situations that our standard monitoring systems missed completely. The Yarnith delegate, Ambassador Thiel, stood to speak. This is correct. When our colonies faced the solar radiation crisis, our own government had written them off as lost. Human ships arrived within hours of our distress broadcasts, but they also somehow detected secondary emergency signals that our own rescue teams had missed. How is this possible? Demanded General Zarthal. Human technology is advanced, but not beyond our understanding. Their ships, their sensors, their communication arrays, none of them should be capable of detecting signals that our equipment cannot. Sarah looked down at Emma, who was now drawing what appeared to be a crystalline dragon surrounded by stars. Maybe it's not about technology at all. Maybe it's about perspective. She stood and approached the main display, studying the pattern of human interventions across the galaxy. Every species represented here has spent thousands of years developing advanced civilizations. You've created incredible technologies, sophisticated political systems, and complex social structures. But, in the process, you've also developed limitations. What kind of limitations? Asked Ambassador Vexhai. Bureaucratic ones. Cultural ones. You have protocols for everything, established procedures for every situation. When you encounter something outside those parameters, your first instinct is to categorize it according to existing frameworks. Humans don't do that. Sarah pointed to various locations on the galactic map. When we received the Yarnith distress signals, we didn't check whether intervention was authorized by galactic treaty. We just saw people who needed help and responded. When we detected the dimensional disruptions caused by the Dragon of Terminus, we didn't classify them as hostile actions. We investigated them as potential communication attempts. Emma looked up from her drawing. Like when the sparkly dragon was making pretty patterns in the walls. Everyone thought it was breaking things, but it was just trying to write letters to ask for help getting home. The simplicity of the child's observation sent a ripple of understanding through the assembled delegates. Commander Thixal updated the display to show a detailed analysis of the dragon's molecular modifications to station infrastructure. The child is correct, he announced. Linguistic analysis of the dragon's modifications reveals consistent patterns that match theoretical models for transdimensional communication. The entity was literally writing messages in the structure of matter itself. Messages that only a human child was able to read, added Dr. Melara. Not through advanced technology or sophisticated analysis, but through simple empathy and willingness to approach the unknown without fear. General Zarthal was studying the data with obvious fascination. The strategic implications are staggering. If humans can reliably detect and interpret communication from extra-dimensional entities, they could serve as early warning systems for dimensional incursions. They could also facilitate contact with other entities that we might otherwise consider hostile. But there's something more important here, said Ambassador Thiel quietly. The humans didn't just communicate with the dragon. They helped it return home. Despite the danger it represented, despite the destruction it had caused, they chose compassion over fear. Sarah returned to her seat, pulling Emma into her lap. That's what humans do. We see someone in trouble, and we try to help. It doesn't matter if they're the same species as us, or if they look like us, or if helping them might be dangerous. We can't seem to stop ourselves from trying to make things better. The chamber fell silent as the delegates processed this revelation. The species that had been brought before them for aggressive expansion and treaty violations was actually driven by an instinctive need to help others. Their unauthorized actions were rescue missions. Their aggressive expansion was really rapid response to emergency situations. Ambassador Vexhai called for a formal vote. Given the new evidence presented, I move that all charges against the human species be dismissed. Furthermore, I propose that humanity be granted full membership in the Galactic Council, with special recognition of their unique capabilities in crisis response and interdimensional communication. The vote was unanimous.
As the delegates filed out of the chamber, many of them stopped to speak with Emma, who was happy to show them her drawing of the crystalline dragon. She explained in simple terms how the dragon had been lost and scared, and how sometimes all it takes to solve big problems is being willing to listen with kindness. Later that evening, as Sarah and Emma prepared to return to Earth, they stood at the observation deck watching the stars. Other families from the station had joined them, creating an impromptu gathering of beings from dozens of different species.
"Mommy," Emma asked, "why were all those grown-ups so surprised that I could talk to the sparkly dragon?" Sarah considered how to explain the complexities of galactic politics to an 8-year-old. "I think they forgot something important, sweetheart. They forgot that the best way to make friends is just to be friendly." Emma nodded sagely. "That's silly. Everyone knows that." As they watched, a new ship arrived at the station carrying the first human diplomatic team to the Galactic Council. Among them was Emma's father, Dr. James Chen, returning from his own mission to establish human colonies in the Outer Rim territories. The colonies that had been labeled unauthorized expansion were being reclassified as humanitarian outposts, designed to respond quickly to emergency situations throughout the galaxy. The aggressive human expansion was being reframed as a galaxy-wide emergency response network, with humans serving as the first responders to crises that other species couldn't even detect. Emma waved at the arriving ship, then turned back to the stars. "Do you think there are more lost dragons out there, Mommy?" Sarah smiled and hugged her daughter close. "Probably, sweetheart. And if there are, I'm sure someone will help them find their way home." The human expansion into the galaxy continued, but now it was understood for what it truly was: not conquest, but compassion. Not aggression, but aid. Not the spread of human dominance, but the extension of human nature into a cosmos that desperately needed what humanity had always offered: the willingness to help, the courage to care, and the simple wisdom of an 8-year-old girl who knew that sometimes the scariest monsters just need a friend. In the years that followed, the story of Emma Chan and the Dragon of Terminus became legend throughout the galaxy. It served as a reminder that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't advanced technology or military might, but the simple act of treating others with kindness and respect, regardless of how different or dangerous they might appear. And, whenever young beings from any species heard the story, they learned the same lesson that Emma had always known: that the best way to turn enemies into friends is simply to offer friendship first, without fear and without conditions, because sometimes that's all anyone really needs.